Hi everyone, this is Tara from Mars Petcare, and welcome to the Optimizing the Omni and Omnichannel session. Just want to go briefly into who Mars is. Most people are not aware that we are the same company, but Mars actually has 6 different segments. Today we're talking specifically about the pet care segment, but we also have a chocolate business, Wrigley, drinks, food, and symbioscience, which is where research happens. We're also made up of key iconic brands, some of which are even billion-dollar brands, but those include Pedigree for pet care, for example, to M&M's and Snickers at chocolate, to even Extra and Orbit at Wrigley. Here in the U.S., Mars Petcare employs over 3,500 associates. We have over 20 office locations, including manufacturing plants. Globally, we're headquartered in Brussels, Belgium, but here in the U.S., our U.S. national headquarters is just south of Nashville, Tennessee. Here in Nashville, we have, of course, our corporate offices, but we also have a really fun facility where we can do product research. So we host dogs and cats at this facility, as well as some pilot plants and packaging labs. But here we're able to test out different products before they go to a larger manufacturing site. It's really state-of-the-art.
Awesome. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Nikki Smathers, a Client Solutions Manager at Skim. In case you're not familiar with Skim, just very briefly, we like to think we are the decision behavior experts. We have a global presence, and we are rooted in choice modeling, all kinds of choice-based behaviors we love to understand more of. Our core competencies are decision journey mapping, which we're going to talk about here today, but we also do a lot of brand communications research in terms of claims, ads, things like that, and we do pricing and portfolio optimization as well. Just to add some oomph, we're very proud to partner with a lot of the world's large companies and brands, we're, really proud. Okay, so why are we here today? Let's get into it. We're here today to talk about the Omni-Channel Ecosystem. Why am I not calling it e-commerce? Well, e-commerce by definition is the transaction of buying and selling online. So the Omni-Channel Ecosystem is much more than just simply online transactions. It's really about the interaction of these channels. The way that we shop has obviously changed from this funnel dynamic that we as researchers used to identify to this really messy map of interactions. A lot of people are explaining omnichannel today as cross-channel being done well. So our goal is to make it easy for consumers to get to the shopping cart, and hopefully they have lots in their shopping cart at the end of this journey. Not doing this well certainly has consequences. Most recently, I think of a story from Starbucks back when in the first quarter they introduced an online app, an app, so that their customers could order coffee and go in the store and have a special line to pick it up. When they launched the app, what actually happened was not anticipated very well, in that a lot of the app customers were waiting for a long time, as well as the in-store customers. So in that quarter, or in that period, sales dropped actually, and a lot of people hypothesized that it could have been because there wasn't this planned interaction of channels, so they didn't optimize their omni.
All right, so let's get into the case study specifically for today. So what the situation was with the market when we kicked off this project was that there was slow online momentum. And when I say this, it was pet care in comparison to other CPG categories online. And so what we were seeing was a really steep growth for other CPG categories within the online space, but pet care, yes, was increasing in sales, but we were not at the same rate. So what we wanted to understand was why. We also had some outdated foundational research, so we really understood the base of the consumer for online specifically, but we didn't understand what the omni-channel shopper looked like and more unique differences in their journey, so we were able to dig deeper into that. So talking about our needs for the project, first we had to profile this omni-channel shopper as mentioned, and so we needed to understand who is the offline shopper, who's the online shopper, and who is this combination shopper that's shopping in both locations, and how can that change over time. We also understood the triggers and barriers. So when I talk about this, it's why did they go to actually buy? It was mostly running low on food and needing that immediate purchase. But for a lot of consumers, they had different barriers also along the way. And so when we think about the e-commerce journey, for instance, the barriers could be different for each shopper, but we understood the key ideas of what was going on that may stop them along their journey, or it may help to continue that journey into actual purchase. We also understood the role of touch points. And so when I mention this, it means things like word of mouth from others. It can mean things like coupons or potentially search on a site. It was how did they interact with the retailers during that journey, but also pre and post journey. We understood the online and offline shopper. And so we were able to dig into, again, these differences between shoppers and also look at the routine shopping journey. So this was a habitual, they're in the same process as usual type journey compared to the disruptive journey, which would really be a switcher journey. And so these consumers had more touch points involved in their decision making versus those that were on a routine shopping mission. The background and methodology for this project was presented to us as a blended methodology, and that's really the reason why we chose to work with SCIM on this project. They presented a unique methodology for us involving qualitative and quantitative research, and so when we break down the qual, what that was for us was individual interviews as well as focus groups. We led a lot of that here at our local research facility in the Nashville area. And we were able to not only talk to consumers with a moderator, but also have them bring in their devices to the facility. So we were able to really dig into how did they use their mobile device or their laptop. And we were able to even bring some of those consumers into our store environments there to see how they would use mobile within the store at the shelf. SCIM also presented the decision journey mapping idea to us, and so this is where you bring in the quantitative phase of, yes, it was mostly a traditional survey and really robust with the actual panel it went out to, but it also involved an interactive consumer plot point activity, and that's where the decision journey mapping comes into play. It also involved many stakeholder alignment sessions throughout the project, and so we worked together on when these would happen for my key team so that they had insights throughout to share with their retailers, and so they didn't have to wait until the full final deliverable at the end of the research project.
Okay, so when we take a step back and look at what we learned throughout this process, we boiled it down to 4 steps. Each one of these steps, though they may seem a little bit fundamental or elementary, each step is really critical in this process. The first step is understanding the channels, where we looked at the brick-and-mortar shopper, we looked at the online shopper, we really tried to understand where they were common, where they were different, we got to know the channels. The second part was mapping the journeys. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a bit in terms of how we did it. But this gave us the opportunity to learn how people were going about shopping. The third step was identifying the channel interactions, touch points, and opportunities. I would say that this is one of the most important steps of this journey, but the fourth step is also important. But in identifying the channel interactions and touch points, that is where we uncover the opportunities and where we saw the most leverage within Mars Petcare. Where were the points in the journeys where they could influence or insert themselves into the journey? And lastly, the socialize and activate. I say lastly, but again, one of the most important parts of this project was bringing the findings back and workshopping them with the various teams and making sure the research didn't sit on a shelf, so to speak.
Okay, so let's go into each step a little further. So the first, as mentioned, was understanding their interactions of channels. And so what we have here is showing the online shopper, so those that do the majority of shopping online. When we talk about the different retailer groups here, it's usually generalists, which would be Amazon and Walmart, for example, that sell cross-category, versus specialists such as Chewy, PetSmart, and Petco that sell only pet care category online. And then we have, of course, the brick and mortar space. And this is where we've had tons of research happening. We've been experts here for years. So we deeply understand what's happening in that space versus this new click and mortar space. And so that's the opportunity between the two, online and offline, that is now occurring with shoppers because they can buy at any moment and any location. Talking some specific examples here. So first would be the brick and mortar shopper and buyer. Just because they're buying in that location does not mean that they're not using online touch points. An example of this would be couponing online at coupons.com. And an example for online buyers, even though they may buy majority online or make their ultimate pet care purchase online, does not mean that they're not going to store. And so they have reasons such as talking to a store rep or maybe looking at the packaging on shelf to help them make their decision, in where they're involving both locations now throughout that journey.
Now that we understand the interaction of channels, it's time to map the journey. And boy, did we map the journey. At one point, I asked our senior project manager for this project how many journeys we mapped, and she just gave me a very odd look and walked away. So I don't know exactly how many. There certainly were dozens and dozens of combinations. From the beginning, we scoped the project knowing that Mars Petcare needed breaks in product types, which would be dog food, cat food, treats, wet and dry dog food. So there were a lot of product types that we needed to define. There were also brand tiers. You have super premium brands and mainstream brands. We knew from the beginning that we needed to understand the differences in those journeys, as well as the retailer platform. So we have your brick and mortar, your online, then we have some that do a bit of both. So it was really important for us to look at these breaks. We also found that there was a journey we had somewhat unanticipated, which we called the disruptive or switcher journey. And so this is a consumer who, for one reason or another, has made a decision to switch brands, either for a pet health reason or price, who knows what the reason is. And they are presenting an opportunity for us to influence this journey. So when we outlined the disruptive journey, it was one of the biggest opportunities for Mars Petcare because we were able to say, here's where people are looking for information, here's where you can provide additional information or an additional lever, be it a coupon, a banner ad, what have you. And so that was extremely insightful. We break down the critical components of mapping the journey, and we first start with profiling. You really want to profile the shoppers in each journey to see how big each subcategory is, who they are, and this helps translate the findings to the general population so that you can look at your strategy in that way. Secondly, you want to look at the activities and touch points in the journey so that you can see which ones are useful and which ones we can influence. If you look at the bottom in the pink on this slide, you see this activity assessment where the quads are using frequently and helpfulness. So in the upper right-hand corner, it's important to know what people use frequently and find helpful, but it's also important to understand what's in the other quads so that you can improve the interaction of channels. Thirdly, you need to identify the top tipping points to see where consumers actually make a decision. So you want to know what the tipping points are before, but you also want to see what happens after they purchase, if that's applicable. And this really helps you in strategizing for retention and loyalty. So in the end, all of these components translate into opportunities broken out in 3 stages: attracting consumers, converting them, and retaining. Concrete strategies to bring back to the organization.
Okay, so then the third step was identifying the channel interactions, touch points, and opportunities. So this has already been talked about within the webinar, but the channel interactions, again, is understanding why they're the omni-channel shopper at this point. It's also understanding the key touch points that we're able to influence along the way, and therefore getting to the key opportunities for us. And so the opportunities were specific to each retailer based on where they are today and where they need to go in the future. Socialize and activate then is the last stage. And what we, again, came out of this project with was a cohesive strategy for our business. So it was taking those insights, bringing them to life, what did they mean, and then how do we actually action them for our specific retailers. We therefore were able to inform our retailer-specific strategies, of course, to help strengthen those partnerships. So this information has gone out to each of our key retailers, and they've been brought in along the way, as mentioned, within the research even, so that they understood what we were going to get out of this project and then what were the actual key findings. From that, we then are able to talk about test and learns with the retailers. Of course, A/B testing here is ideal, and that's why we need the retailer buy-in at this point, is because they're able to do the consumer A/B split for us for audience measure. But we're able to also show the opportunity of, if we go to test this, this is what we'll learn, and this is how you optimize your own site. So when we look at the stakeholder involvement throughout this entire project, we can kind of bucket these into a few different points. And so what we started with was a key review team that was about 1 to 2 associates from each of our account teams that would sit down with me and Skim to talk about just general business questions and any hypotheses we may have. So we laid that out on the table, and we were able to get upfront alignment on what the project scope would entail. Then in step 2, it went out to a broader team, and so this was the main project stakeholders. So it was everybody that sits on the account teams that would be involved with the work itself, but more specifically the findings from the project. And we were able to have those key review sessions with the team throughout the project, as I mentioned, but also then share the project status with our customers as well. And then step 3 included additional stakeholders. So this included teams such as the traditional brick-and-mortar teams, my Shopper Insights peers, shopper marketers, even account managers. And it also went out to cross-functional teams such as marketing, consumer and market insights, and R&D teams to talk about things such as e-commerce packaging. And then step 4 was, it's also gone now to global teams. And so we've been able to understand now the US findings, and compare that to the UK or China, for instance, that are also markets more involved in the e-commerce space, but talk about the unique consumer dynamics that are occurring in those spaces and why the countries may differ or compare to one another. And so lastly, let's talk a little bit about key learnings without going into too many specifics of the findings from the project. First for us, though, was this early and regular stakeholder involvement. It was really important to have that buy-in from the team to ensure that they were not only understanding what was involved with the project, but also how to use the insights and bring those to their accounts. We also learned that cross-channel insights significantly strengthen our partnerships with all of our retailers, and that was regardless of if it were an e-commerce retailer or a brick-and-mortar retailer. They all want to understand what's going on with this omni-channel space and how to reach consumers in new and unique ways, especially when items now are being shipped to home, for instance, with consumers. We also understood the role of search or importance of social throughout the project. This is just kind of an example to bring to life that we were able to prove and disprove our hypotheses that we started with at the beginning of the project, and we were able to provide focus through this with our internal discussions. Such as search was very important for us. It has to win in that space within the pet care journey, but social, for instance, was not as important. And so when we break out social, yes, consumers are involved with social all the time, say Facebook at home, but they're not necessarily involving social with a product purchase decision. And then lastly was consistent visual cues across our channels. And so this is not just talking about at shelf or things like that, but it's also how do we bring to life the pack or other selling imagery online when they're not necessarily seeing a physical product. And so it's talking about the pack shot and how we can clean that up and also rotate it so that they know what they're getting, but then the secondary imagery or even video and how important that is in a decision making process. All right, so that takes us to conclusion of our webinar for today. Thank you so much for attending.